and with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew.
Glory to you, Lord.
When Jesus heard of the death of John the Baptist, he withdrew in a boat to a deserted place by himself. The crowds heard of this and followed him on foot from their towns. When he disembarked and saw the vast crowd, his heart was moved with pity for them, and he cured their sick. When it was evening, the disciples approached him and said, "This is a deserted place, and it is already late. Dismiss the crowd so that they can go to the villages and buy food for themselves." Jesus said to them, "There is no need for them to go away. Give them some food yourselves." But they said to him, 5 loaves and 2 fish are all we have here." Then he said, "Bring them here to me." And then he ordered the crowds to sit down on the grass. Taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, and looking up to heaven, he said the blessing, broke the loaves, and gave them to the disciples, who in turn gave them to the crowds. They all ate and were satisfied, and they picked up the fragments left over, 12 wicker baskets full. Those who ate were about 5,000 men, not counting women and children. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
I have to be upfront with y'all this evening. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to head out after the morning mass out to East Texas to spend a week at the Pines Catholic Camp out there, and kind of just spend the week with the campers and the counselors, saying masses for them and providing sacraments for them. I don't know why I sign up for this every year the first week of August. It's a really bad time to be outside for 6 straight days in my habit. But anyway, so camp will start tomorrow evening with Sunday Mass for the kids. So this is where I said I have to be upfront with you. I wrote a homily for the kids for tomorrow, and I finished that. I was like, oh, that's great. And then I remembered, oh, wait a second, I need a homily for Good Shepherd as well. And I figured, you know what, let's just double dip here. So you get the homily today that I have prepared for the kids tomorrow, a homily prepared for ages 7 through 18. So just close your eyes and imagine you're at summer camp, I guess. Okay, so I try to go to confession every few weeks. And I think that's important. Obviously, it's important for all of us. It's important for priests as well. We're certainly not immune from having to go into the confessional. You know, I used to hear anecdotes that John Paul II, who, mind you, was a pope and is now a saint, John Paul II used to go to confession every single day, if you can imagine that, which probably means that I need to go every single minute, if you're to kind of proportion that. But, you know, I do what I can. Anyway, you know, one of the things that I find myself confessing most, and I probably could confess it every single time, is that, to put it simply, I just don't trust. I don't trust that God can provide for all of my needs. I may say that, and I think deep down I want to believe it, right? But I think I'm lacking in that trust that I know that God is calling me to. Because here's what it looks like for me when I plan my day. Now, my day probably looks a little bit different than yours, but I would think that we probably all could kind of have this in common here. I treat all of my let's say priest duties, spiritual duties, kind of just as things to get out of the way before I go and I do all of the other things that I kind of place almost as a higher importance, or the things that I think will ultimately really make me happy during the day. So I'll kind of prioritize, all right, first thing in the morning, we're going to say Mass, we're going to pray, make sure I do my prayers, maybe I even spend some time in front of the Blessed Sacrament. If I'm really having a lot of free time, I'll do a full Holy Hour. Good. Get all of that stuff done, that's important, and then my day can really begin. Right? Then I can really start doing the things that I need to be doing. I can go for a run, I can exercise, I can go to the movies if I want, I can even, if I have time at the end of the day, I can play a video game or read a book, I can go and listen to music, watch a baseball game. Now we're talking, right? Now we're talking. Now I've got a good day planned out. So when I look at my schedule to see how I've kind of planned this, it's kind of my metric of whether or not I have a good day planned or not is how much fun stuff do I have planned? How much interesting, exciting stuff do I have planned? Not necessarily what does my spiritual life look like, right? My prayer time or the time I spend at Mass, the time I spend intentionally with Jesus. I'm just focused on all the extracurriculars, all those superfluous things. And that's because, like I said, like all of us, virtually all of us, I fall into the same trap every single day, and that is I just don't trust fully that God is really the source of my life. I don't trust that God really is the most important thing. I don't trust that God can truly meet all of my needs and help me feel rejuvenated and energized and fed. So I do what most of us find ourselves doing, and I look elsewhere. And that's kind of what's happening in our gospel today. Actually, that's exactly what's happening in our gospel today, right? Jesus he's preaching to the people. There are thousands of people there. If you can imagine what that scene must have looked like. And they're kind of out in the middle of nowhere, away from any town or village. And the disciples say to Jesus, well, they have what really is a pretty good idea. They say, hey, look, these people, they've been out here listening for a while. They're going to be getting hungry soon. We're kind of far off the beaten path here. So why don't we let them go now? Let's let them get a head start going off into town before it gets dark so they can find something to eat. And Jesus really shocks everyone when he says, nah, we have all we need right here. We have what we need right here. They don't need to go anywhere. You don't need to send them into the towns to find other food. What do you have on you? 5 loaves? 2 fish? That'll do. That'll be fine. Do you think that anyone looked at those 5 loaves and 2 fish and thought it was enough? Of course not. You would be almost insane to think that that could ever be enough for what we hear are 5,000 men, not counting women and children. But was it enough? Absolutely. Not only enough, but more than enough. There was an abundance. Because our God is a God of miracles. He's food that never runs out. He's a fountain that never dries up. So, when I look at my schedule for the day, and I see that the only thing I really have planned is Mass and prayer, it's tempting for me to say, not enough. Not enough. Better plan some other things. Better go get my entertainment and my energy somewhere else, because this just isn't going to be enough. But what miracles God can do in my life, in your life, through what doesn't seem to us to be enough. The Mass, the Eucharist, prayer, maybe that hour I spend, or even that 10 minutes I spend in front of the Blessed Sacrament, that could be and should be all that I need for the rest of the day. That time I spend in the chapel in front of the Blessed Sacrament, that could and should be all that I need for the rest of the day. But do I trust that it is? Or do I find myself just kind of looking for other things that can satisfy me? Listen to what God says through the prophet Isaiah in our first reading today. He says, "Why spend your money for what is not bread, your wages for what fails to satisfy? Heed me, and you shall eat well. You shall delight in rich fare. Come to me hastily. Listen, that you may have life." I always like to remember a story, and I know I've probably shared this before. I know it's a story I share all the time when I do the First Communion Masses for the kids. But there was a young lady, a young woman, I think a teenager, by the name of Alexandrina Maria da Costa, and she's known today as a blessed, so she's on her way to becoming a saint. And she was a young girl in Portugal. The story is just unbelievable, but she was paralyzed after she jumped out the maybe second or third story window of her home, her family's home, to escape men who had invaded her house and were trying to attack her. And from that moment on, obviously she was paralyzed. She was hurt so gravely in that incident. But for 13 years from that point on, from the moment she was injured to the moment she died, she consumed only Jesus in the Eucharist. And this isn't just some pious myth. This is scientifically verified. They had doctors and scientists go and examine her because they were trying to figure out what on earth is going on here. No other food. She wasn't sneaking meals at night. She couldn't even walk. No one was bringing her anything. The only thing she was receiving was the Eucharist. A priest would come visit her each day and bring her the Eucharist. No other food. The doctors were stupefied. They were baffled. Not enough. Could not possibly be enough. That's what they were saying. But it was. Isn't that the theme, right? It is enough. It is. Look at all the things I load my schedule with. I'm sure every single one of us can say the same thing. Look at all the TV shows I'm trying to watch, the sports I'm trying to watch, the things I'm trying to fit in my life each day. Look at all the extra food I'm trying to consume, because in my broken nature, I just don't trust that God will feed me. But He will. Evidence in our gospel, it's evidence in the lives of the saints, and I have to believe it's evidence in each and every one of our lives if we're honest and we sit down and we reflect on all of the ways God has sustained us. So here's the main idea here. No one is saying that you can't have a life that's full, right? Full with hopefully hobbies and fun things that you get to do, vacations, time spent with family and friends. But we can never make the mistake of believing that those things are necessary to give us life. All that's truly necessary is God's presence alive in us through Jesus Christ, His Son. He shows us this so clearly in our gospel today. He's enough to feed us. Even what looks like could never be enough, ends up being more than we could ever consume. And again, I think we've all experienced that before. We've all experienced what it means to be truly fed by the Lord, but how quickly we forget. Again, this is part of being a fallen human. God sustains us, He blesses us so abundantly, and then we wake up the next morning and we have amnesia, right? We totally forget all of the ways that He's fed us and sustained us. And I do the same exact thing. Some of the most full and beautiful days of my life have been ones where I had nothing but the Lord's presence in my life, through the Mass, through prayer, through the sacraments. And yet every day I wake up thinking, what can I do to fill the emptiness? I forget. So when you plan your day, think first of Jesus. Everything else is just icing on the cake. How blessed we are to receive a gift that sometimes seems so small. A little communion host, maybe a few minutes in prayer, a decade of the rosary, a quick visit to the Blessed Sacrament. Things that are so little, but leave us feeling so full.